and I'm going to share my screen now. And then let's jump to actually Bug Guide, which some of you know and maybe others don't. I'm just going to take you here because what I want to talk about is that's, for example, Ceratina is a good example. Actually keying out to Ceratina as a genus is, I would say, it's not a straight pass through the Discover Life guide or anybody's guide. It also often is buried down. They don't have classic characters that key well, but the vibe is really easy and straightforward once you know it. And we're going to talk about that here in a second in more detail by going to the genus memorization scripts. But just to show that it's useful to just look at a lot of things sometimes. So, for example, if you think you might have Ceratina or something else and you're not sure, and I do this all the time at the species level, if I think there's information there, I go and see what Bug Guide iNaturalist has. So I'm just going here to the front page of Bug Guide, and I'm clicking search for Ceratina. You could do species, but there's different avenues. So you can click on one of these characters here. This is my way of getting there. And it shows a bunch of pictures that have within it the word Ceratina. If you click on any one of them, you get to something that looks like this. So there's a picture of Ceratina calcarata. And here is a taxonomic string. So a lot of times, like if I'm looking at, say, a genus level thing, I'm just going to click on the appropriate level. So now I'm at the genus level for Ceratina, and what I can do is I can use a variety of these links up here. So mostly what I'm going to do is either use images or browse to just get a sense of what it looks like that.
Sam, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, you're not seeing my screen. Okay. Oh, I know what I did. I did the wrong, sorry, wrong sharing mode. Okay, unsharing now. Okay, do you see it now?
Yep.
All right, I'm just going to reverse. It'll just take a second. Let's go to, well, we can do it from any place in Bug Guide. So I usually use the little search bar up here, Ceratina, and I'll get a bunch of pictures that match that text string. I can click on any of these pictures that look like it might be Ceratina in this case. Now I have a picture of Ceratina here. This one is, actually it only goes to the subgenus. But up here is the taxonomic breakdown by different categories. So I'm just going to go to, if I am interested in getting a look and feel of Ceratina as a genus, what do they look like? What's the vibe on that? So that when I'm looking at things, I can say, I think that's a Ceratina. That's very useful to know. So a lot of times as you're learning, you would want to go to Bug Guide, iNaturalist, or just Google Images, which is a little sometimes not so useful because they do nearby identifications or pictures too. So you have to be careful with that one. So Bug Guide, if it's a North American species, is super useful for this kind of thing. And what I like to do is go to browse. So I've got, I'm at the genus level. I can look at things. Sometimes the info, which it naturally lands on, is useful in terms of, oh, look, they have ID stuff too. It's hit or miss in terms of how they present that, but sometimes it's another bit of information that you can use to learn about the group. It tends to be a little sparse, but sometimes this information is useful. It's all volunteer, so it's hit or miss. But what I like to do is, I can get this to browse, is hit the browse tab. Now it allows me to go through again, through the different taxonomic levels. So it's going to go to subgenus first, and we'll see both of these subgenera, and also, and then it just picks a small number of pictures of each of these, and I can very quickly go through. I can jump up to higher levels, and I can just look at a lot of pictures. If I go to images, oh, I'm now in Ceratina-smaragdula, it should show me pretty much all the pictures it has. If we back up to that level and do images, it's at this point it should be listing out every single picture that it has, which can be extensive. Anyway, a good place to see things. So now let's go to learn more about the ID of Ceratina. Move that up to there. So here we are in the B genera memorization area, and we're looking at female Ceratina characters. And so we're going to see this when we get to the microscope. But basically, they're shiny. The eastern ones, the most common species in North America, but worldwide, they can be incredibly variable in terms of what color markings they might have and what the base color is. But in North America, you basically have white markings on a shiny black, but more commonly a shiny dark metallic green-blue, very similar to Dialectus and Osmia coloration. So it's shiny, and there's not many hairs. So it does carry hair on its legs, but the overall body hairs are quite short and sparse, which is, again, puts it in a different place. They're small, so we're talking plus or minus size of a grain of rice type sizes. In the female, which is, this is a listing for, there's almost always a very short white bar, sometimes reduced to a mark in the middle of the clypeus. A lot of times it's a rectangular bar. We'll see examples. And at the end of the abdomen, it forms a it's very pointed. In fact, there is usually something that essentially is a point at the end of the abdomen of the females. So very different. Additionally, I think it's not listed here because I've run out of space to list things that I've written. But when you also look at it, the abdomen in both the males and the females is very parallel-sided. So it's a little bit different than many of the other species, which have a abdomen that is somewhere in the ovalish shape, or is certainly not parallel-sided. And it's ridged in a way because the tergites are not smoothly transitioning to the next tergite, but have I would call them indentations, or they're recessed a tiny bit between. So it looks like almost like the ribs of a water bottle. That's the presentation in the females. If you key it out, you know you're going to have to deal with the traditional characteristics that have to do with number of submarginal cells, and it actually takes quite a while to get through that. Let's see here if I can get to the male characters. The male characters, again, very similar, but on the clypeus, it's a T-shaped mark. Again, we'll see some of those. And at the end of the abdomen, in the males, is a flange. So we'll see what that looks like, but it's a plate-like projecting lamellate, if you will, flange, very distinctive, like nothing else has anything like that in any of the other genera. And then on the hind legs are swollen, and that's often a character. Again, we're going to look at that. That separates out the species. Other species of bees, of course, have swollen femurs too. So let's get into it now. So you have this particular vibe, so that basically you never have to, once you learn what that is, you don't have to look up Ceratina anymore. but it is probably worthwhile going through the key to key out a few Ceratina initially. But it's one of these things that can be very quickly learned. Okay, so here is a dark Ceratina. Where's my magic piece of paper to try and change the lighting so you can see things? We have the usual problem. Let's see if I click on AE here. Well, it lightens it up a little bit. I'll bring it up higher. So here is the overall look and feel again. Let's back down. The abdomen is roughly parallel sided. You can't see that well because of the wings. There's lots of ribbing or surface indentations between the tergites. Largely, they're going to be this dark colored blue. Sometimes, particularly in Ceratina-smaragdula, you get greenish ones. So this, what we're looking at is Ceratina-calcarata. And you can, I'll shift this here so we can look at this is a female. One of the as a bonus, we will get into, because so many people have issues with Ceratina identification at the species level because it's nuanced. What isn't nuanced in bees, though? So here's a good marker for a possible Ceratina-calcarata, which is the mark on the clypeus, instead of being a nice big, relatively large rectangle, is reduced. And often the front end is wide and it tapers off to the back. Sometimes there is nothing, that's rare, and sometimes it's just a spot. And also, just so you know, this is not absolute, sometimes it's a big rectangle. So if you see this, you have a strong indicator of calcarata. Another aspect of Ceratina identification that will drive you crazy sometimes in trying to discern and become absolute about its presence or absence, or its pattern at a species level, is this pit patterning on the scutum. So let me just point out that whenever I'm doing large collections, there's always tons of Ceratina, or almost always tons of Ceratina in them, and a certain proportion of them are just Ceratina species, or I might say it's this or that. That's totally good. You don't want to end up saying, I don't really know, so I'm just going to guess. It's more likely that. Don't guess. Go up to the next higher level in terms of your determinations. And that's the way it is, because sometimes you can't really tell. So in Ceratina-calcarata, one of its characters, and this would be same for in the females for Ceratina-micmaci, is that, let me just orient you first. Here's the central line, and here is a parapsital line. Remember last week we were talking about these teeny weeny osmia hoplitis ones. Well, these are the normal case, long like that, and the center one is in the center. These are markers, so we'll reference them, and what we're looking at is then this pitting that occurs in various places in this region. Now I'm going to sneeze for a second. Clare has infected me over the internet.
Rude.
So I didn't sneeze, but I just have to say that I'm going to sneeze and then I won't. In some species, this is quite well pitted. What does that even mean? It means that the parapsital line, that there are lines of pits from the top to the bottom. There's always pits up here, there's always pits down here, and there's always pits on the lateral sides. But within this box of the center line to the parapsital line, that's where the ID focus will be when you're going to species. Here, it's relatively unpitted in here. So on our not relatively unpitted ones, it still has gaps. Okay, so we'll see Ceratina-dupla, and you'll see that there is quite a few pits in here. So what you're looking at is these areas, particularly along the parapsital line and along the center line. And there's usually just one line of pits down here, and often as we get a little bit to the posterior, some breaks in those lines, as you can see here. And then there might be scattered pits in here, but mostly this is clear and therefore shiny. So that puts it into the pocket of Ceratina-micmachi or Ceratina calcarata, as in this case. But sometimes you are also stuck with, okay, what do I'm still not 100% sure. Now, a good character, but one that takes a little practice to see, and this is why you would want your own reference collection in lots of cases, is the white hairs, or the hairs, which generally are white, but sometimes in the other species have a slight amber to orangish tinge under the tergites. I'm going to center this a little bit more. So this took me forever to figure this one out. I mean, in terms of just finding it. So if you see here, and this is, again, it's one of these things you have to look at a bunch to get the idea of, but you'll see some differences here. Is in Ceratina calcarata, no matter what's going on in terms of the clypeus and what you may or may not be able to see well on the scutum in terms of pitting, there is usually let's just call it a fair amount with often 10 plus per sternite of white hairs under here. So difficult to quantify, but when you see some of the others that are almost completely absent of hairs, micmachi is our main target in this because of its other similarities. If, for example, if the clipial marking in a specimen is ambiguously restricted or not, and you have a clear space otherwise, you have to really look at the abdomen sternites to differentiate micmachi and calcarata. In fact, you really do have to always look at the sternites because calcarata can have a full mark or a not full mark and still be calcarata. And I can't quite remember, but I believe every once in a while a micmachi will have a reduced mark. So the level of marking is not an absolute character. This one, though, is, but takes a while to learn. So we will be on micmachi in a second. So that's female characters. Now I'm going to take you to Ceratina calcarata, male, and there's a different set of characters. In fact, I don't think they overlap between those two. Between males, but you're using a different set of characters to ID males and females. So here we go. Let's get a overall picture first again. So, oh, look at how filthy that clay is. So here is the overall body. Let's see if I can run this up and fill the screen and get a better, if the lighting will change for us. I wonder if I can run it way up. Now change the lighting. It does not. Well, a little bit. Let's go back down here again. So here we are, roughly parallel-sided water bottle abdomen, not that many hairs. There's the T-shaped marking. I'm going to show that better in a second of a male. And then we can't see it right now. Maybe I can push this off. We can't see it. This exists in all the males. I can't remember if it's on the females. This little tuft of hairs and a slight point, that might be on the females too. It really doesn't enter into ID though, but it's just another part of this Ceratina package that makes them pretty easy to just spot. Okay, but now that we're in this area, let's go to the scutum. And even though this is the same species as that last one, you will see, as I believe all the males have, that in our magical area of between the parapsital line, which I'm having a hard time. Let's see if I can run this all the way up and get the light better. So I can't quite give you where the, well, I'm just going to change the thing here a little bit. Let's see if I can get to what we want to see. We're trying to see the pitting pattern again, similar to the others. And really all I want you to note is that there are lots of pits everywhere. Here's the central line. The parapsital line is over here somewhere. But look at all the pits. Okay, it turns out this is no longer useful in males because the males throw a ton of pits on their scutum all the time. All the species do. So that's not useful. Here to illustrate the T-shaped part of Ceratinas. Oh, we have, get that in focus. And do that. Maybe white balance. Okay, this T-shaped thing very clearly says it's a male. You can look at other features too. Sometimes in Calcarata, this is also reduced, but many times it's like this. It's full born. It'll be exactly the same look in McMackey. Okay, now we're going to look at that flange on the abdomen of this specimen, and they all have this, okay, but the shape of it, it turns out, is very useful in discriminating. It is very bright. Discriminating the species apart. Bring that down there and jump this up. Probably should have used the black clay today. Okay, somewhere right in there. And there's a flange. Check the, well, we can do it different ways. Here's the abdomen. This is that tuft of hairs is roughly right there. Not visible, but also not that useful. This is the flange. So this is projecting shelf-like thin flange. All the species have this. When you're looking at Calcarata, note very wide compared to its height here. So it's just a very wide flange, and we'll see some different shapes to that. But that is a good tool for separating out this from, say, Strenua. But it is similar enough to McMackey that that's not a useful character there. In comparison, it is wider, though. So now we'll go to the other area. Yeah.
We have a question. Are T-shape found in all male Ceratina species?
I'm going to say in the United States, North America, I think the answer is probably yes. Certainly in the East, worldwide, there are a whole bunch of really cool different Ceratina subgenera, and the answer is probably no when you go worldwide on that. And so, but within the US, I believe the answer is yes. Possibly worldwide, don't know. Okay.
And then on the flange, I just wanted to let you all know that's currently, I don't think that is, there are pictures of that distinction up in Discover Life, but I have them and they will be posted.
Yay.
That's one of the imminent changes.
Thank you, Claire. All right, so now we're going to look at the rear femur, which is a key character in, see, I'll put it in this way maybe, in Ceratina male, not in female, male discrimination. I got to get the angle right, though. I think this is a good specimen, but I'm not sure that I have the angle here very nicely set. Let me just see. I think maybe the other side was the right side. Boom, boom. That is a bad perspective. I'm gonna, how about upside down? This is why, again, we keep pointing back to using your fingers to manipulate the specimen, which I'm going to do right now just to find the right presentation of the specimen. That looks good, just like that. And okay, so here to orient you, this is probably a good picture right here, like this. Move this box. Abdomen here. The flange is back here. I think you saw that well enough. You don't need to go to it. Here's the rear leg, and the femur is here to be there. And what you're looking at is where is the femur broadened. In this case, it's first of all very triangular looking, and the high point is roughly in the center of that femur. So in Eastern North America, this is going to be different elsewhere, there are only, of the two blue species, it's only calcarata and strenua that have that shape. And we'll go to other species and look at the other shape. So roughly, if it's calcarata, it has this and a wide flange. Boom, it's, you know, it's calcarata. That is easy peasy. Okay, let's go to, maybe we'll just go right to McMackey since we've been mentioning it. It is a relatively newly described species, and I'll point out that the flange in the key of the revision of that group was swapped with, in terms of the key has swapped the flange figures. So they're actually the opposite of what they should be. In case you are looking at it. All right, so we're going to McMackey now. Let's see, is that, maybe we'll do the male since we've been most recently looking at the males. Is this the male? No, I think this is. Yeah. Okay, so here's the male again. Take this off, and we are really, with this group, we really are spending almost all of our time looking at the flange and the hind femur. Strenua has another, males have another character that's useful, but we'll talk about that when we see Strenua. Other species in other parts of the US and the world have different character strings. I don't know them well enough to talk about them. So here's the flange again. The tuft of hairs is a little bit in the way, so I'm going to bend it over so we can better see the flange. And okay, so tuft of hairs is still in the view there, but this is the flange. You can see, if you have good memory, visual memory, that this is not as broad compared to the lateral width. In fact, it's almost semicircular, but as you'll see, this is difference in between dupla is subtle but important. It's still a little bit broader than dupla, and strenua is a very tiny hump. Okay, so thinking about that, we're now going to go so that's not actually terribly useful, right? We know it's not strenua, but we would know that anyway. Let's see if I can find the femur, which I can this time, a little bit easier. I'm going to bend it for a better view to there and zoom in. So the femur characters here, what I like to use, there's a couple other subtle but very difficult to pick out characters in on the femur. But we get close here. So notice right away, okay, so this is a male. Drop this piece of paper. This is a male, and
A male what?
A male Ceratina-smaragdula, and the femur shape is very different. So instead of it being widest in the middle and being triangular, it's vaguely oval, and the weight of the center point is well towards the base. So that's widest near the base. And then another super key character, and this is really because Ceratina-smaragdula, which looks very close, does not have this as a different character here. This apex of the widest point has no tuft of hair. There's some little scattered hairs which are there present, but there is no tuft of hairs. And you'll see when we show dupla, there's a little tiny tuft of hairs there. And that tells you that it's presence of hairs there, dupla, the lack of hairs, Micmaci. There's also in Micmaci these ridges here, which are not very ridgy, are less sharp. But that I find most people have an incredibly difficult time seeing, and sometimes this leg is in a bad position to see anyway. But the tuft of hairs is almost always going to help you out. Okay, so let's now jump to the female of Micmaci.
Any questions while he's pulling his specimens?
Oh, I do have that box. There it is. I'll just say that a lot of times, depending on what your study is, particularly if you're using bowl traps, you can have unbelievable numbers of Ceratina, and you will have to look at them a lot. Okay, so, and then it just is a struggle to tell the species. That's why we're just doing it instead of waiting for later. Again, I just don't know the Western ones enough to be helpful. What am I looking at? Filth. There we go. Okay, here's a more classic female head shape, roughly rectangular, larger in presentation. Rarely does it erode like it does almost always in Calcaretta. Not a given, but this would lean you towards Micmaci. Then, if we look here at the scutum, we have the same presentation of the scutum in terms of pitting patterns. This whole central area largely bare. The central line is running here. Parapsital line is somewhere there, but very few to no pits, just like in Calcaretta. Now the key will be to look under the abdomen and look at the hair patterns there to help you differentiate in a more final absolute way from Calcaretta. So if we look at the hair patterns here, so there often are just lots of little tiny hairs. But if you look here, there's essentially almost no, or just to a scattered few long hair. So if you recall the Calcaretta picture, I'm going to try and get you a side view. We were looking very laterally at calcarata, and you would have seen tons of white hairs projecting up. And basically in Micmaci, you, particularly on this S3, 4 area where I spend most of my time looking for hairs, there is almost none. You get, like, if you can see right here, a few little hairs, but basically nothing like the amount and number of hairs, which it wasn't great. It wasn't like, you wouldn't say that was absolutely furry, but the contrast between the two is quite dramatic. So this really says this is what you're looking at is a Micmaci, because otherwise you simply have to go on the clipial marking, which is sometimes in the general pattern is often broken, and so it can't be used all the time. And sometimes you just say, I'm not sure, and you would just put it down as Ceratina species. Okay, so now
for hairs primarily on the rim of the sternite or throughout?
Throughout. If we have time, we can go back and we'll do a comparison, direct comparison of the two. Okay, so now putting this away, and now I'm going to go to dupla. So what are we working on here? Is this the female? Yeah. So we're going to go now to the female dupla. And if you look at the female dupla, we have as in most of the time, a strong clipial mark. Okay. So probably not calcarata from that. But when we go to the scutum and we're going to say, look at the amount of pitting in that marker region between the parapsidal lines, you'll see a very blurry image right now, but it will emerge that there is a heck of a lot more. So this is the one that probably is the most, gives me the most fits. Let me see if I can get this to sharpen up somehow. Does not want to really do anything different. Wish I had a better adjuster on this. But what we're looking at, let's see if my vellum paper will be useful. These are very, all these Ceratina are very shiny. So yeah, there you go. Well, I just want you to look at the pitting there. And you can see there's still open gaps where there are no pits in the middle. But if you look adjacent to the center line and adjacent to the parapsidal line, there are at least 2 lines of pits, and then there's some more scattered ones. Every once in a while, that whole area is almost completely filled in. But most of the time, you have a in-between status. And so here's the center line, right? So line of pits, another line of pits. Parapsidal line is over here somewhere. More than one line of pits going down into this area. Not the greatest of characters, but usually what you do is you go through quickly you move all your Ceratinas together, go through them quickly, and then you begin to get a sense of what the patterns are that help you separate things out. And usually you have males, which are, I think, generally on average easier to ID. I'm going to show you, because it's in the, oh my gosh, what happened there? In the screen, I think this is the front leg, that right here, I don't know if that white spot is there. This is how do you tell this species from Ceratina strenua? There is either no white spot or it's a tiny one, or is it up there? I'm disoriented. I think the contrast with the other one will tell us. So I'm not going to spend too much time here because we're running shortish on time. So the key here is the white leg spot is reduced to a spot or absent on the front tibia up here. And the it should be right there. I'm gonna try and find it. So and this is going to tell this species from Ceratina-smaragdula. I'm not going to broach the problem of Ceratina-floridanum, which is, I have problems with that one in terms of ID and being firm about it in its areas of overlap. Recently, there was some new paper by Sandra that showed that species showing up, at least in terms of its molecular markers, way north of Florida, which scared me because I'm not sure how to tell it apart at this point in most cases. So it would look like a Ceratina-dupla, but have a long white mark like Strenua. I'm still not getting the mark. So the mark's going to be right here. And there isn't much to show because it basically has no mark or is very reduced to a white spot. You might see something that vaguely looks like a white spot there. Try bend that a little bit. I think I'm not going to, because the Strenua I have picked out has that nicely done. So lots of pits on the scutum, a simple white mark or no mark on the front tibia, and you have dupla, at least in the northern parts of it. And I'm going to put this away, and we'll go to the male. So if you recall, the male is going to key and be most confused with the McMackey. So first we'll look at the flange. There's a truck outside for some reason. So I think we're seeing the hair dot. Again, not the most important part. I want to see the flange. Put that in this direction. And we're going to look at the flange shape. On dupla, and it will be subtly, very subtly, more completely a semicircle, as if it's split from a circle rather than wider as in McMackey. But as you can see from simply looking at this, that is extremely subtle in terms of its difference of that shape. So most of the time it's not that useful. But if we go now to the hind tibia, I'm going to try and find it before I show it, to try and locate it under the microscope on the scope in myself. Let's see, I had two, but I think I want to use this side, and we'll do it like that. Okay. Okay, so under the abdomen, there's the sternites. Flange is visible at the bottom. Going to zoom. So just to orient you, there's the coxa. This is the hind leg. I'm going to get a better picture of this, but this is the flange area. You can already see the white tuft of hairs, and that's our marker for dupla. It's dark in there. Oh, I just lighten it up. So here again, hind femur shape is oblong with the greatest width towards the base of the segment. at the tip of the apex of the whitest part is a small tuft of white hairs that tells you that you're looking at dupla. It's not, the resolution here is not great. And it is pretty, and this tuft of hairs is really small, so I'm struggling here a little bit, but it would be also difficult to see. But that's the tuft of hairs. Let me try changing the lighting again. Doesn't seem to be making any difference. I'll try shading it with the vellum paper. Ooh. So there you can see that the white reflects off the white hairs quite well. So you can see that pretty easily. I'm going to sneeze. Maybe. Maybe not. Excuse me. All right. So that tells us that we're looking at dupla. Okay. Now, the last one tends to be pretty easy. It's a smaller, the very last one that we'll show is really easy, but this last one is Strenua. Strenua is a lot smaller. It's never bigger, but some, like Calcarata and Dupla and Micmaci, every once in a while you get a small individual, but there's never a giant individual of Strenua. So if we pull the specimen and look at it, this is a male. What we'll see here, if we can find it, I think it's, I got to pull this up. There is, I think our feed is getting really slow for some reason, and the white balance is out of whack. There we go.
5-ish minute warning.
Okay. Smaller, tends towards green. That's not particularly useful. Has in the male, so the other species have some white in the front tibia, but the male in this species has that white goes all the way down. It's a complete white stripe down the entire front tibia. That's a really good marker. And the plate at the back end is super tiny in terms of it's about as tall as it is wide. Get a better angle on that. Zoom in, pull this down. I'll play with the lighting here a little bit, but tuft of hairs, this is the plate. Really small, about as tall as it is wide. And if we play with the lighting a little bit, that will show up perhaps a little bit better. You can see, I think it in a various iterations of the lighting there, that it's just quite a small segment. So that's good. And then when you look at the hind femur on this one, it's going to look exactly like the triangle shape of Calcarata. Calcarata, though, has very wide flange on its rear leg, and got to locate it here. And Strenua has a very has that super tiny one and the white stripe. Calcarata has on the front tibia just a tiny, tiny white stripe. It doesn't go down the whole length. Slightly out of well, let's move it up. There we go. You can see triangular shape to the femur, and the widest point is in the center, actually wider than the others. Tiny flange makes it this species, very quickly, I know we're running out of time, show the Ceratina-smaragdula, which is even smaller, very southern species, and then we can maybe take a question.
Did you show a Strenua female?
Oh, I didn't. Right. Let me go hurrying along here. So female. So the female has, like dupla, on the scutum, a lot of pitting. Pit density is high. So that doesn't put it into the same category as Micmachi and Ceratina, but you have to now differentiate it from, it's not lighting up. You have to differentiate it from, let's just change the angle on it, from dupla. And you do that by looking at the white mark on the front tibia. Actually, we can see that here. So here's the tibia, here's the white mark. It extends down, doesn't go all the way to the end. On the male, it does. On the female, it's just going like this. And the pitting pattern on here is dense, like dupla. The parapsital line would be over here somewhere. And you can't see this super well, but there's multiple rows of pits along the parapsital line in particular, and probably a couple here. Not helpful. But when you're wondering, is it dupla or is it Strenua, you might have a sense of that because this would be small, but this tells you that white stripe. Now, because they're bees, sometimes this white line can be faded. I would call it faded. It's not probably really faded, but it can be difficult to see. It seems to blend into the integument more. You have to look back and forth. You might also call some of these Ceratina species also. All right. The Ceratina cockerelli is tinier, is really an obvious specimen when we get to it. Maybe I'll just stop because I know we're out of time and ask if anyone has any questions.
We don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay. Here's cockerelli if people want to see cockerelli. A lovely, fun little thing. Very easy to ID in the east. Now in the west, there's a couple other species that are in the same group that I think may be different. Very glossy, boldly colored, very few pits. And I can't get the lighting to show this dark bee that well. Let's see if, let's do that a little bit. It's basically super glossy, almost no pitting on there. This is also really, really tiny. No questions? Well, maybe we're done.
Anybody? Okay. I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands. I've been waiting to make myself like a mini cheat sheet for this of all of those like different ways things could go on these species, and even being along for this ride, I am re-energized to make such a guide at some point. We'll see. Would you like that? Questions?
Ceratina is pretty rough.
Huh?
Ceratina can be pretty rough.
Yeah. It was, we had Jess in the chat say that this would have been very helpful during their master's program. It didn't help that McMackey was described midway through their thesis either. Not fun. Preeti sent me the pictures of the male Ceratina with inverted T-shape, so I'll post those on the team. And before you go, next week we have Bombus on schedule, but then I've run out of things that you have requested. So if you have requests, send them. If not, following Bombus, we'll just start moving alphabetical through the remaining genera. I hear a Melisodes. Oh, I love Melisodes. Okay. So yeah, just so send me some requests and I'll put them on the schedule and we'll keep going forward. Any other final things? Okay. Well, have a great week, everybody. I'm going to stop recording now.